We are live, coming in with a mass archer build against a legion. You requested to practice against this matchup, and later in the day we're going to be practicing our Skaven versus vampire counts. If you haven't seen the build before, it's pretty brutal. You have nets, you have Plague of Rust, and it's just going to be a focus fire on all of the big Tomb King's monsters. Their cavalry can't really do much against Lothar and Seaguard, and their infantry will generally lose out against the Silverin. We don't have too many monsters, and we do very much have to worry about chariots and so on. So there's definitely a lot to worry about. Legion going in for a long flank with his cavalry. We'll have to position our forces to act accordingly. In this case, we're going to have our heroes and lords along the right flank to net down the big Tomb King over here, while our cavalry delays the Nehekar horsemen along the left flank. As for the infantry, they'll be a little bit hard to actually push past through. We're going to be positioning them so that they are in between the Tomb King's infantry. That should work out just fine. Some cavalry coming in through the side. We have our silver helms at the ready. Stop them if needed. We've blocked up many of the Tomb King's skeletons here. Using our spears, they may try to push through, but they'll take a lot of damage attempting to do so. Now, with the cavalry coming in along the sides, the goal is going to be, let's see here. We're going to position our silver helms, but actually there's some chariots here. And you know what? We're going to net the chariots down. We're going to net them down so that we can shoot them to death with our archers, as the chariots are quite threatening. And after they're down, we're going to turn our Lothar and Seaguard to, I guess, hit up these skeleton horsemen over here. There are also some stalkers coming in along the flank. A little bit worrying. And we also have a fiery convocation we could throw down. Let's try and hit the Tomb Guard with that. And in the meantime, we're just hoping that our Lothar and Seaguard really hold out here. We're buying time for our spears to be effective and techless. As long as he doesn't get sniped out by this Tomb King's Lord, then he should be good. Now, the Stalkers are a bit of a threat, but I feel like the Cavalry have a little bit more DPS, especially on our squishy archers. So that's going to be the focus for today. Our Cavalry will just be doing what they can to stop the different Tomb King's forces from firing. And our archers are going to start kiting back. One thing that we've done so far is that we've taken out a lot of the mobility for the Tomb Kings, which means that our archers can actually begin kiting here. And by splitting up, it makes it much harder for them to collapse in on my troops. Meanwhile, our front line can now move back into our back line to help defend. And we're going to throw down a Plague of Rust on the Stalkers, just to finish them off as quickly as we can. We don't really need to snipe out the Tomb King right now, since he already has a lot of life. He'd take a lot of ammunition to take down, and at the moment we just don't have enough archers to really handle that situation. So instead, the much more vulnerable Eyes of the Desert will be getting finished off, leaving our cavalry alive heading into the late game. Now, as you can see now, many of our archers are coming back. So our plan appears to be working out quite well. Of course, the Tomb Kings, they do have a lot of infantry still, specifically a lot of Tomb Guard, and they're going to be a little bit of a problem to deal with. They're mucking up a lot of my archers, and we can't really do much until they die. So the goal is going to be finishing them off instead of the Tomb King. This priority picking should work out fine. Some spirit leeches are going down onto my high mage of metal, but she's not too worried about that. Actually, just by keeping away from this lich priest, we've been able to avoid most of the spirit leech damage. And now the Tomb Kings are in a little bit of a dicey position. They have almost no infantry left. We still have many archers just spread out across the map. We still have Techless and our caster of metal, which is basically all we need to really take care of the rest of the units here. We'll just have to be a tiny bit careful. Classic mistake coming into, I have lost my cavalry. Very unfortunate. But at the very least, they're not especially needed at the current moment. Now, some of our archers are finally getting freed up. I'm contemplating whether or not I want to net down the Tomb King. He is charging straight towards my lords, so I think we will net him down, even though we probably can't get too much damage on him. Instead, we'll be focusing in on the infantry, since I know our Silverin will likely be able to win out the game if it does go into the very heavy late game. Even if Teclis and our Mage of Metal dies, it should still work out just fine. A Fiery Convocation just helps pull back the Tomb Guard. It gives our Spearmen a few extra hits, and as long as we're careful not to have our Silverin get hit by our own Fiery Convocation, it's a good enough use for it in these late stages of the game. Now our caster, she's about to die, so we're just going to throw down the Plague of Rust on the Tomb King. There's not much else she can really do if she does die, so we might as well throw that down. Teclis doesn't really need all the Winds of Magic, so we're happy to do that. And now, since our net is back off cooldown, we can throw it down onto the Tomb King. That'll stop him from charging my archers. Actually leaving the net zone for a second, a little bit worrying, but charging straight back in. And now we'll be able to snipe him out. We'll use our Flaming Sword of Ruin to get past any physical resist that he might have. And it'll also buff up our damage, even if he doesn't have physical resist. As for our Metal Caster, she's off the battlefield, but we finally hit that stage of the game where we're not too worried about losing. It's should be pretty clean from here on out. We'll even throw down a Plague of Rust just to really seal the deal. Tomb King now at 65 armor, low enough for the High Elf archers to get a lot of damage in. Teclis 2 can heal himself with his potions. And there we go! Basically it. Not even the cheesiest micro in the world will be able to win it at this point. Unless, I guess if you draw kites, but given that, that we know Legion well enough, I don't believe that will be happening. So cool, I guess we'll just take a look at chat while we wait for the game to close out. He has given the GG. Fredrich, hello, happy to see you in chat. Optimus Pine, frequent viewer of Warhammer, happy to see you. And here we go. Can take a look at some damage numbers now. You can see the Silverin almost always live until the late game. The cavalry maybe less so, but they do the very important job of stopping the cavalry. And as for the archers, just about all of them should have paid for themselves. And you can see indeed, actually not all of them, but most of them got much more value than I put in, which is about what you expect with this build. Here we go, the second game against Legion. He's trying out a different strategy. And this time, it looks like he has the usual skeleton horseman. This time a Kemrian War Sphinx, the Tomb King, and the usual Lich Priest of Death in the back. We're seeing a lot of skeleton horsemen taking to the flanks to start off. And a nice response to this is simply moving your Lothern Sea Guard into that position. In fact, we'll even move these guys over here. That way our archers are protected by a sort of square boxish formation of Lothern Sea Guard that should be able to keep them safe. As for all of the infantry, we can probably get some shots off on them to start out. So let's move up our archers to do that. And then just get a little bit of poke damage to begin. Some skeleton horsemen getting caught out by the insane range of the High Elves, working out quite well. And we're going to be using our spearmen, using our micro to try and block all the Tomb King's infantry as well as we can. There are no Tomb Guard here except for on the flanks. So we're feeling not too threatened. Some of them are trying to sneak by. We'll use our spearmen to bog them down. Teclis, he could throw down a Fiery Convocation to block up another unit of Tomb Guard, but I'm not sure. Some skeleton horsemen coming in too. We have our cavalry moving in to intercept. Some, let's see, Eyes of the Desert coming in too. And this time, Legion has done a little bit of a better job getting his infantry into my backline. Nevertheless, we can turn our archers to shoot in the opposite direction from the Tomb King's infantry. And that'll make it so that the infantry doesn't really bog down my archers, and they'll still be able to get as much damage as they usually would. Really just demolishing those skeleton horsemen archers, getting them to crumble almost instantly. Pretty nice start. We have a fiery convocation we could throw down right here to see if Legion has his micro at the ready. And we're going to throw down a glorious net onto this Tomb King. If it would go down, there we go. We'll debuff his armor and focus fire him with our archers. We've caught multiple Tomb King's units here with that combination, and that'll work out quite well since it means that the cavalry won't really be able to stop a lot of my troops here. So you can see we're already getting in a lot of damage onto that Tomb King. Although the net will run out and he will start be able to cause havoc in my backline. But we've set ourselves up once again into that situation where we can begin kiting out my opponent, since he does not have a lot of mobility left. One big problem though is that we are having Teclis getting, he is actually getting picked off a little bit. Not great. He'll be trying to run for his life. He will be able to distract the Tomb King decently well while he retreats, but a big volley from the Eyes of the Desert actually getting in a lot of damage onto Teclis. We'll see if he can escape here, and if he doesn't, that would definitely be quite unfortunate. Nevertheless, our kiting can commence. We'll be pulling back. We do still have a metal caster, but there we go. Teclis actually dying out there. We do catch the Eyes of the Desert in some spears. We have successfully kited away from the Tomb King's infantry on this side. But things are looking a little bit worse than last game. Specifically, Teclis dying is really bad. The Tomb King still alive. Our focus fire not enough to take him down. We will be getting some routes here, but many of our troops will be coming back. So all is not lost here. We will just have to continue to kite to the best of our abilities. Our cavalry will be integral here for cycle charging Tomb King's infantry where they can, and we want to make sure we're not really worried about ammunition here. That's much less of a problem compared to many of the other issues that we'll have to worry about. Now let's see, our spears are holding decently well. Our archers, many of them have rallied. We will be able to cycle charge the Tomb Guard over here. And it's just skeleton spearmen on this side. They're not too much of a problem. Let's see, they should be going down to the archers fairly quickly. Eyes of the Desert getting chased down. We'll keep our cavalry away from them as well as we can. And we'll continue kiting away from this really slow Tomb King's infantry force. One major advantage, once again, that we have here is that they only have 2 single entities that they can really use to bog down my troops. Aside from that, there isn't really much else, and the fact that we have spears at the ready will really just cause a lot of problems for the Tomb Kings here. So, it's basically just executing that. You can even see the balance of power now tipping in the favor for me, with many of these troops getting kited out. The Eyes of the Desert at really just too low HP to really pose much of a threat on the map. And eventually we'll probably want to have some sort of regroup with our troops. The Lich Priest of Death too is going to he's gonna eventually die. He'll either get caught by spears or shot to death, and if he continues to overcast spirit leeches, that will also kill him. We do lose a few of our archers on the far flank, which is quite the loss, a little bit unfortunate, but we still have this core of 4 archers, which should be able to do well. Not to mention many of the spears that we have currently, And we're going to be using those spears to defend these archers and to make it as hard as possible for the Tomb King to bounce around on top of my units. He will be able to get a charge on my cavalry, but we can push through and sort of just ignore most of that damage, crumbling the rest of my opponent's infantry. And as for the War Sphinx that's coming in, we'll have to be a little bit careful there. The Eyes of the Desert, too, are going to be a bit of a pain. And I'm going to conserve my cavalry specifically so that they can provide some mass against the Tomb King's monsters here. That mass will be quite important for actually being able to win here. War Sphinx charging into my spearmen. We're going to try and brace for that charge. And it looks like we'll do that just in time. The War Sphinx getting slowed down a tiny bit by my spears will be very important. The next targets, I guess, probably the Tomb King. And whatever our cavalry is able to bog down, we're going to be using Plague of Rust to shut down. So that's going to be the plan. We have, let's see, we do have the Mage providing leadership here, which is sort of our last bastion of hope. And there is an interesting thing where our ammunition could actually run out here. And if our ammo runs out, well, then that's real bad. We definitely don't want to run out of ammo. We do still have a full HP unit of Silverin, though, and that will be helping out a lot. There's not a lot of infantry for the Tomb Kings, which is good, so really all we have to do is spread out our troops so that they're close enough where the Sphinxes can't dodge, but far enough where it's difficult to bounce between them. It's going to be the goal, using our cavalry to give mass. They'll just be positioning far back and safe away from my opponent. And let's see, I guess the Tomb Guard, we don't really want to waste our Silverin on them. We will have to use a little bit of ammunition to kill them off. So that'll be the goal. And hopefully it works out. Tomb Kings or Sphinxes taking the flanks. We'll be moving our spears in to try and slow them down. We'll have our cavalry in here to assist too. Tomb King now getting engaged into combat. We'll try and catch them with our cavalry. We'll hit them with a Plague of Rust and hopefully hit them for a decent amount of damage with our archers. We'll see how that goes. A lot of our cavalry actually getting routed off there faster than I would have hoped. The Sphinx now coming in. We'll try and brace our spears against it. And hopefully that goes okay. As for the Tomb King, he is able to dodge many of our archer shots. And we're now getting really low on ammunition. Definitely pretty scary, but he's getting bogged down in some infantry again. It's just it's gonna be a little bit rough, actually. The Tomb Guard specifically will allow for my opponent to stop my spears from bracing, so we're actually going to focus fire them with our archers and see if we're able to take them out. After they're dead, he can't really cycle charge my troops, and that might be the advantage we need to get the victory here. So that's going to be the goal. Focus firing the Tomb Guard as best as we can, so that our spears can just blob up on the infantry and win it from there. There is a Fate of Buna that could come down onto my Silverin, and I'm really just hoping that he doesn't have enough Winds of Magic to really pull that off. Tomb Guard now getting extremely low. They're going to be routing off in just a second, and then we're going to be blobbing up onto all the monsters for the Tomb Kings. We'll be pulling back our archers so that they can fire, and even though they will be able to push through to try and catch my archers, which still should turn out fine, since this 80 models of Silverin is just extremely difficult to actually finish off. Can even throw down some Plague of Rusts wherever we feel it is necessary, and then we should be good. We have a lot of Lothern Sea Guard. Even though the balance of power isn't in our favor, everything here is large, and that should be good. So let's just group up with our troops. That'll make it so you can't really bounce around anymore. That'll be an end to the cycle charging. Or not really cycle charging, but bouncing between my troops and getting them to rout. We'll save the Plague of Rust for when I have no more routing troops to chase off. And that should work out just fine. Our caster actually getting really low here. We'll try and get that Plague of Rust down. Hopefully that works out okay. The War Sphinx taking a lot of damage. The Tomb King charging in through the back. But a mass terror route actually going to be making it game there. That's going to be GG. And it was close enough where I think if we hadn't lost Teclis so early, we could have won that quite handily. So there we go. You can see Sphinxes getting in a lot of damage. I probably could have focused down the other Sphinx in this situation. The Eyes of the Desert got a lot of shots on my cavalry. And yeah, just losing Teclis so early was a big misplay. He was a little bit out of position. And then from there wasn't much I could do. So there we go. On to the next game. Could be High Elves against Tomb Kings. Could be Skaven against Counts. And here we go. The next game up against Legion. Going to be Skaven against the Vampire Counts. I'm trying to adapt my builds so that they are much... I'm trying to adapt my builds so that eventually we don't have to worry about Counts so much as Skaven. And to do that, we're going to start off by running a pretty hardcore just a pretty hardcore gun build, essentially. We're going to move our Brood Horrors to lock down the left flank. Should be able to do that rather well. And given that the Counts don't have too many infantry troops, we're feeling pretty confident. We have many rattling guns, and we'll be using them to slow down the cavalry long enough for the warp fire throwers to actually get their shots off. That's the core strength of this build, and let's see how that goes. You can even move up with our Poison Wind Globadiers a little bit, because we have so much support fire in the back ready to fire in if needed. So the zombies will be getting buttered up by the Poison Wind Globadiers, and that'll do enough damage where our Skaven slaves should be able to take the fight, but I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to see. Second volley coming in, getting in some good damage. Some troops moving around the back. We can simply turn our guns to face them, make that a little bit easier, and some dogs are finally charging in. They're moving into the line of the rattling guns though, so they're going to get slowed. Some warp fire will come in, and I expect those dogs to be having a very rough time. As for the cavalry, they're not too scary. We'll be chasing them down with our... We'll be chasing them down using our Lords and Packmaster. And that should be able to negate their value. For the front line, we're holding out okay. The Crypt Ghouls are actually pretty far back. But now that they're moving in, we'll have to worry just a tiny bit. Some Dire Wolves coming in too is a little bit worrisome, and the Lord also flying up ahead is going to be a tiny bit scary. He can't really land though, so that should be fine. Some of our troops do get caught up, but given that we have support nearby, I think they should be able to hold out well enough. Now, these Hex Wraiths are going to be taking a lot of damage from the Poison Wind Mortars. Meanwhile, the Triads will be holding down the front line, and we're going to bring back our heroes and lords now into a safer position just to make sure that they don't get sniped. As for our caster, he has Howling Warp Gale at the ready to snare down Manfred. That should stop him from engaging. And once again, we have a pretty decent mobility advantage here. Given that Skaven are generally quite fast, and a lot of the cavalry is gone for my opponent. So we'll be trying to snipe out the Vargulf probably. Manfred can't really get too close, and if we can kill that off, that would be really nice. So we're going to buff up our Lord to make sure that he doesn't die. And just keep a close eye on Manfred, essentially, making sure that he can't really get too close. There we go, he is beginning to dive in. So we're going to net him down. My bad, we're going to net him down. And hopefully gun him to death. Meanwhile, our heroes here are getting caught up, but we do have magic damage to kill off the Hex Wraiths. And there we go, the glorious Skaven weapon team fire. Focusing Manfred down. Probably be, they might actually kill him here. We'll have to see, he's getting extremely low. Our Lord may rout off, but if he doesn't rout, that would be a surefire win. We also have many weapon teams left and rallying along the fringes, and there we go. Manfred does indeed fall. Our Lord is getting sniped out too, but if you just look at the balance of power at the top, we're doing well enough where we're not too worried as long as we don't get a mass rout here. So let's just make sure that doesn't happen. The Vargulf has actually survived the double Packmaster, but one major problem that the Counts have here is that many of the weapon teams will rally and come back to get a lot of damage in. The Hex Wraiths will take a lot of damage from the magic fire of the Warp Fire Thrower, so they'll be going down. And what's really left for my opponent? He has a Vargulf. He has 2 White Kings that are actually killing my caster here. A little bit of a misplay from me, but since he's been able to kill off Manfred, there's not much else for the caster to really do. So it's not a huge loss that he's dead. The White Kings will be getting cycle charged by our Lords as soon as they heal up a tiny bit. And I think the Packmaster should be able to win against the Vargulf. If he doesn't, we do have the Ixchia's Triads, but double Scab Scrath comes down, brings them quite low, so we actually do need our single entities to be able to kill off the Vargulf here. Nevertheless, not too bad. Let's just pull out our weapon teams to a safer position. Warp Fire down the Crypt Ghouls. And then I think that's it. On the mini-map, there's not a lot left for my opponent. So we should be good. We should be good. We've bogged down the White Kings too with our Skaven slaves. And yeah, this should be enough to kill off a Vargulf. Unless he gets some really lucky hits on my Lord, which is always a possibility. We should be able to win it out. I think that may be a GG from Legion, and there we go. Nice. Classic gun build coming in to win the day. Here we go. Manfred with a very small 500 damage value. Against 3 Rattling Guns, that seems to be the golden number to pick him off. One of them getting 2,400 damage value. Very nice. The Ixchia's Triads didn't get too much damage themselves. But I'm pretty sure all my weapon teams performed amazingly here. Very high damage numbers. I just have to make sure I don't lose my Warlock Engineer and I keep my my Brood Horrors alive. So here we go. Skaven against the Vampire Counts. We're trying out a different build since this is very much different from my usual playstyle. It's going to be Skaven box. We didn't bring the Plague Monk RORs since they usually get sniped out pretty easily anyways. But we may get punished for that since our anti-infantry is quite important. Right off the bat, we do get a solid hit onto some Blood Knights, which is already really a really good start for the Warp Lightning Cannon. Blood Knights do pull out of range of the cannon, so we'll just retarget onto I guess some White Kings. There aren't a whole ton of good targets here. We'll also be moving back our monsters so that if the cannon has to fire to the left, we won't friendly fire any of our troops. And it's just going to be a slow wait while the Vampire Counts move in to while they move in. Spirit Leech will be coming down on the Warp Lightning Cannon. We're going to drop it and we pick it up after the Spirit Leech effect goes away. This way we actually save the artillery pieces, which works out quite well for since I do expect the Warp Lightning Cannon to survive for at least a while. I think a Breath Attack might be coming down right now. I'm going to move some of my troops, but instead it's just a zombie summon. We'll bring in just some Skaven slaves to fight it, I guess. just because we don't want to get our lords and heroes tired from actually fighting zombies. That would definitely be inefficient, and using Skaven slaves will be more than enough. We've pulled the warp lightning cannon forward, and looks like it should be doing fine. Some scab scraths go down on my clan rats, actually not getting too much damage. And we're going to move forward just to engage the zombies while we have a preferable engagement, missing the fact that the breath attack was going down and losing about 1,000 gold's worth of council guard. Definitely not an optimal play, but we're going to see if we can make that up by taking down this black coach, which has actually taken a lot of damage so far. Another zombie summon coming down too onto my warp lightning cannon is going to be shutting it down for the next while, but it's not too terrible. We have Throt. He's going to be moving in to, I guess, snipe out the White Kings at this point. And we're going to move our Plague Priest to start Mortis engineering the infantry of the vampire counts. Should work out fine. We'll spread out a tiny bit so that more scab scraths don't do more damage than they should. And Black Knights are coming in. They're going to be charging right on top of my Plague Priest. We're going to try and summon to catch out some of the knights, but they do pull away. So Legion playing well here. Let's see, what are we gonna do? We really want to kill off the black coach. I think that's going to be the priority. So we'll send in our monsters to do that. Pull them away before they get surrounded by the blood knights. Another big breath attack coming down onto my council guard, but not doing nearly as much damage as before. And we're going to keep using our summons to try and catch the blood knights. As for Throt, he'll be dueling the White King, seeing if he can do well there, and we're going to keep chasing the black coach while keeping our Mortis engine, the bell, engaged so that it can help win against all the infantry here. Throt, in the meantime, is going to be saving a lot of his abilities for a bigger engagement. But it looks like, let's see, the Blood Knights are coming in. They're doing a lot of damage to my Hell Pit Abomination. I really wanted to get some Rat Ogres summoned on top of them. That would be optimal situation for me, but let's see what we can do. They do try to pull out. We're going to summon the Rat Ogres now to try and pin them down. It looks like we only catch a few of the Blood Knights. That's not great. At the same time, not terrible. And yeah, we catch a few. It's I'm not sure how I feel about that. I feel like we could have definitely caught more, but the summon going a little bit incorrectly. The Rat Ogres don't actually stop units until a little bit later. My Plague Priest too is looking to be getting caught. Another Scab Scrath coming down. It's going to be looking pretty bad. So our priority right now is going to be trying to escape with the Plague Priest. If he lives, that will be a very nice situation. And it's going to be very important that he does actually make it out of there, since we definitely want that Mortis engine effect. We're going to group them up back with our heroes here. And in the meantime, we're going to continue trying to snipe out this White King. Since if we take out all the single entities of the counts, it's just the Blood Knights that are their win condition. Still definitely very scary, the Blood Knights, but we do have a lot of monsters that can do well there. And our single entity squad may be able to just win out the day here. We'll have to see. Given that more Blood Knights are coming in, we'll summon another group of infantry to try and cover there. And hopefully catch them out. Trying to kill as many of them as possible while sniping out the White Kings. A very important move, since the White Kings are really good against the White Kings are really good against big monsters. They have very high melee defense, and to kill them out early gives us a really nice lead there. The Council Guard too are really important to keep alive, because for the Council Guard they have their the physical resist buff. That is extremely important for actually for keeping all of our single entities alive here. So those are our goals. We'll be trying to keep them by keeping all of our troops safe here. The Vampire Count's Lord can't really land just because of all the monstrous units we have here. And here we go. He actually does decide to come down. And we'll see if we can punish him for that by bringing in our monsters. And it looks like we aren't able to, but he doesn't stay for long. He doesn't get too much damage, and that's not the worst situation. As for the White King, he is nearly dead. And hopefully he'll go down. Another big land on top of Throt this time, trying to take out my leadership. And Throt's actually getting pretty low on leadership, but I think he should be fine. Morskatar's Hellion too, getting into combat against the against Manfred is really nice. And the Hell Pit even getting in an attack before he does escape. But this is still a really rough situation. We don't have any infantry to back us up, and we could see a lot of routes going down now. So that's definitely not great. Even Throt routing off himself. How could you, Throt? I need you to stick around. And here we go. Our Lord, our Plague Priest caster, who does a rally. Throt comes back too, but takes a massive hit. Looks like he will be routing off again, and that's probably the end of me. Just losing Throt and getting my single entities picked off. It appears Manfred will likely be able to carry out the rest of the game here. But our two monsters are still pretty scary. Let's see what's actually here to kill them. A half HP unit of Blood Knights will probably be enough. But just in case, we'll stick around in the game to see if they're able to pull some miracles here. Throt's going to be getting chased off by wolf rats, or not wolf rats, dire wolves. Not a good way to go. And even a charge in from Manfred too is going to be quite painful. So that's pretty rough. Morskatar's Hellion getting knocked miles away by the Black Coach too. And here come the Blood Knights. There's actually 2 units of them. And their cycle charging will do a lot to my monsters. We will be able to chase them. And these guys are regenerating. As soon as Throt dies though, I expect their leadership to break, but you never know. Manfred even landing now. And here's our chance for a comeback. Wow, the Morskatar's Hellion getting a little bit of Minotaur syndrome, getting knocked around. But if we can get some really lucky hits on Manfred, that's going to be our goal for victory. But it doesn't look like it. Morskatar is actually getting routed off. And that's going to be army losses for us. GG to Legion. So yeah, there we go. I'm going to see how much damage the Morskatar's Hellion actually did. Same with the Hell Pit. I didn't have a lot to really stop the Blood Knights that game. You can tell based on their damage value. If you look at these two, it was actually the Hell Pit that wasn't carrying. Pretty surprising. But I guess yeah, actually, that's pretty surprising. This guy does have AoE, but he did a lot more damage than the Hell Pit. At a slightly cheaper price, too. Pretty interesting. It might have just been RNG, but the damage numbers are big enough where it's actually relatively significant. As for the Warp Lightning Cannon, it did its job. Forced my opponent to engage. But, sadly, Throt and the Assassin, not really the combo that I was looking for. They weren't really doing that much for the entire battle. They did snipe out the White Kings, which was good. But that's not really enough. I might sub these guys out for something in the future. And of course, my job controlling the Plague Priest could have been done better. So GG to Legion. But this next game, it's going to be the Dwarves against the Lizardmen of Legion. He's brought 3 Kroxigors, so it's going to be a rush, but also an Ancient Salamander. Probably to pepper down my Longbeards just a tiny bit. He also has Tic-Tac-Toe dominating that air game. And we could move up with the Gyrocopter. He does have a lot of infantry, so the hope is that he doesn't have too much anti-air aside from Tic-Tac-Toe. We'll see though. And the Ancient Salamander could do a lot of damage to the Gyro Bomber too. We'll have to worry a tiny bit, but to start off, we can just pick away at some Saurus Warriors. If we damage them enough, our Longbeards will be able to win that initial fight, and that could be very important. The Kroxigors too are really important to take out early. And given that most of the infantry is this way, we're actually going to rotate our army so that we can better face the front line of the lizardmen. Definitely don't want them to get too much of a hard flank onto my miners, because we want to keep our Trollhammer torpedoes firing as much as possible. That's going to be the goal. The game has started out fairly well with our focus fire on these Kroxigors. We've done a good amount of damage to them, and hopefully can get some volleys on Tic-Tac-Toe too, since he doesn't have healing, and if we do actually rout him off in the late game, that could be quite important. A cohort of Sotek diving into Grombrindle. Going to go for a bombing run on top of them, and this could be huge if not microed correctly. Gyro Bomber moving in, dropping in 3 bombs, getting in a nice amount of initial damage. There we go, that essentially deals with them. Our miners are going to be turning to try and get their shots off on these skinks. Our Trollhammers are going to be positioning to snipe off the Kroxigors as quickly as they can. Ancient Salamander firing away at my Trollhammers. They actually do have a lot of fire resist, so we're not too worried about that. And with the Kroxigors coming in, we should be able to focus fire them down. Gyro Bomber doing well there too, but I'm hearing a Manticore summon. Grombrindle might have a little bit to worry about. He will have to pull away to a little bit of safety. He can slow Tic-Tac-Toe though, just by flash bombing. It does actually affect air units. That's pretty nice. The Kroxigors do push through, but they're not especially scary here. Essentially, we just send our Slayers in on top of them, and you can see they're already getting routed off. As for these Skinks, they're having a hard time pushing through, and Legion has actually gone for a very far flank to try and avoid my front line. But what this allows us to do is it lets us bring our front line into the back to actually prevent all of these guys from it prevents them from getting my Trollhammers engaged on top of the Longbeards here. It doesn't really matter that there's a gap in the back, and that should work out pretty well. Now what is pretty bad is that we have lost our Gyro Bomber to Tic-Tac-Toe. Definitely not optimal, but our Trollhammers are able to fire now, and we will be able to get Longbeards to allow them to continue firing, so they should be able to do quite well. But things are still a little bit dicey here, especially the loss of that Trollhammer, or not the Trollhammer, of the Gyro Bomber is actually really, really unfortunate. We definitely needed it to get a few more bombing runs in, and that's definitely going to be quite bad. Grombrindle getting engaged on 2 is not great. The Manticore will actually get in a lot of damage onto him, and now our Trollhammers are even getting compromised. There's still a unit of Kroxigors that we need to take down, but a miracle, the Gyro Bomber does actually return to hopefully come in and get some solid bombs off. If we're able to kill off the Kroxigors too, that will hopefully allow us to win the infantry fight. The Ancient Salamander will be able to do a lot of damage to the Longbeards, but probably not enough to really win the day here. Tic-Tac-Toe diving into Grombrindle now. A little bit of a risky choice from my opponent, since Tic-Tac-Toe could take a lot of heavy hits, but if he kills Grombrindle, that will be quite the win for him. So we'll see how that plays out. Grombrindle getting really low now, and it looks like he will be dying. But there is an opportunity to focus fire Tic-Tac-Toe with our Trollhammers. A big Amber Spear does rout off my Gyro Bomber, but a big volley from my Trollhammers gets Tic-Tac-Toe very close to routing, and that would actually be just the worst for the Lizardmen. Their Skinks don't have a lot of leadership, and if Tic-Tac-Toe routs off, then we would be expecting many of the Skinks to be routing off the map. As for our Bolt Thrower, it's actually been doing really good the whole game. It's brought the Ancient Salamander down to basically no HP. As for the Saurus, the fact that we still have many of our Trollhammers alive should actually kill off most of them. And from there, the Longbeards should be able to take care of the rest. Now, Tic-Tac-Toe is still alive. He can no longer really participate in combat, given how low his HP is. The Ancient Salamander now getting shut down too. And the Trollhammers have routed off the Saurus Warriors. It's looking like a victory going to be coming up, but we'll still have to be quite careful. There's still many Saurus that we'll have to take out. And we don't have a Lord to really clear off the endgame situations. But the Trollhammers, oh my goodness, a single volley, routing off a unit of Saurus Warriors quite handily. We'll now turn them onto these guys. And from there, it should be a pretty solid win. This matchup hinges a lot on the Trollhammers doing well. And you can see here, if they can actually get firing, that's basically all you need to do to win out the game. These Saurus Warriors now routing off. We even have a unit of Slayers to chase them down. And another volley here should solve that situation. And for Tic-Tac-Toe, the moment he lands, he should be taking a big volley. And that should be able to take him out. As for the Salamander, it looks like it has actually died. I'm not sure what killed it off or if it just routed off itself, but that's definitely a huge plus, since it means that Legion won't be able to cycle charge in the late game, which would be a pretty big problem for my Trollhammers. Oh, actually, there it is. It didn't die. It's coming back, and we'll see if it comes into play, because we have actually routed off Tic-Tac-Toe. It's going to be a huge leadership debuff for the Lizardmen, and if we can get one more volley off, that would help out a ton, but just short. Barely not catching Tic-Tac-Toe. We'll see if he rallies in the late game. For our Longbeards, we're going to split them up so the Salamander doesn't get in too much damage, but it looks like it won't even matter. It's out of ammunition now. We still have our Trollhammer secured. Many a Longbeard unit. And that should be it. Tic-Tac-Toe off the map. Going to be a GG. Well played from Legion. And a victory for us. Actually working out quite well. It just hinged on the fact that the Trollhammers were able to stay alive, essentially. We killed off all the Kroxigors with them. Yep, there we go. Very little damage on those guys. And for the Trollhammers, each and every single one paying for themselves. The Gyro Bomber, actually not paying for itself, but that was because of a miss micro. If we had controlled it better, it may have been worth it to take. And everything else performed about as well as you would expect. Still though, the game was very close, and I think if he didn't have an Ancient Salamander, we could have gone overrun very easily there. He also took Tic-Tac-Toe. It's definitely not a meta pick. And the fact that the game was so close despite these two picks is pretty scary. Things could have gone much worse for sure. So we've now jumped into a best of 3 ranked game. You can check that out on the Discord below. We are going to be starting off with a Lizardmen counter pick against High Elves. Guess what? We're going to be rushing with the same build that I always go. Flank overload with Skinks, Cavalry, so on. Mazda Mundi picking up the flank too, and a very powerful front line to take care of all of the Rangers. And Spearmen, Saurus can run over both. There are some Silverin that we will have to be wary of, but they're not especially, they're not too much of a problem. We're also seeing the benefits of having Chameleon Skinks, their high missile resist, eating a full volley of archer fire like it is nothing. And for the Silverin, you know what? We're just going to throw down a banishment on top of them. If they retreat, we have our spears that can charge into them. And that should be able to take care of them rather well. Our Skinks are going to be moving forwards, try and sneak in through the front line. Some Dragon Princes are moving in. They do take a little bit of banishment fire, but here we go. We can throw down a net on top of them to make sure that they don't escape. And that should be good. Our Saurus are engaging into the front line. They're going to be getting cycle charged a tiny bit. Not too terrible though. And with the loss of the Dragon Princes, we're feeling a little bit more comfortable. Now the archers are going to be a tiny bit of a problem. because they can shoot at my flank overload here. But we'll drop rocks on them. That should be able to take care of them. Our Croxagores will be moving into the back line. And the Dragon Princes, a little bit dangerous, but we have our red-crested skinks here to deal with them. So we're not too worried. Meanwhile, we have our chameleon skinks doing rather well, and the Croxagores and skinks have also made it into the back line. Definitely pretty good. Red-cresteds will be refusing to die, and we'll be buffing up the Carnosaur to make sure that it doesn't take too much damage amidst the chaos. So here we go. Our position in the game is quite good, as we have routed off the Dragon Princes. The Silver and Guard, of course, are still a bit of a problem, but if we get a Terror rout on them, that would be quite big. There are still a lot of Dragon Princes, though. We'll have to try and figure out a way to deal with them. We'll throw down a Ruination of Cities, and I think that will likely be enough, especially right on top of the Dragon Princes too, doing a lot of damage, and we actually get an immediate Terror rout after that Ruination of Cities. Definitely worked out quite well. And now with those guys routing off, we can chase them down with Mazda Mundi. We can chase them down with the Carnosaur, and that should be good. Now the Dragon Princes are regrouping, and they will be, let's see, looks like they will be diving in towards my Croxagores. So we'll throw down a net on top of them and make sure that they don't actually get their charge off. Dragon Princes are shock cavalry, so they do rely pretty heavily on their charge to get their damage. So throwing down those nets should help us out quite a bit. You can also see the huge importance and the reason why we had the red-crested skinks take the flank. They managed to come out on top of these fights against Silverin and Dragon Princes with a decent model count, and generally they come out on top of battles with a good enough model count to continue chasing off troops. They are pretty brutal and really hard to deal with as the High Elves. They help a lot in the fight against the Dragon Princes, and I think without them, Dragon Princes probably would have been able to win out the day there. Our Carnosaur is getting a little bit out of line, so going to give him a we're going to give him the cold-blooded ability to make sure that he doesn't run away and get himself killed. And now we're just going to be regrouping with our forces here. We'll be catching out many of the archers of the High Elves, splitting up Mazda Mundi and the Carnosaur to hit up both of the archers, because the infantry is much less of a problem here. It's just a few Dragon Princes essentially, and with our monsters, Dragon Princes won't be too much of a problem since there are just so few of them. They will be taking a big fight in the Star of Averlorn. We don't want to be fighting there since they will be getting a lot of healing, so we'll just pull away to negate the damage from that, and that should work out pretty well. More Dragon Princes coming in, dive in onto my Croxagores, and even more coming in along the flank. We'll net those guys down and then charge these ones on the Croxagores. That way most of the damage is negated on that front, and in the meantime our chameleon skinks can do the dirty work of actually chasing off all the infantry. All these netted Dragon Princes too can eat a big old banishment that should be able to kill off most of them. And there we go, getting in some pretty good damage. We'll even throw in a Ruination of Cities, and after all the big spells go down, we'll be able to bring back our Croxagores to actually take on the fight. Combination of spells doing a lot. Really, in fact, getting Terror routs on the Dragon Princes almost immediately after. Working out pretty good. There's only one unit left that's still active and able to fight. But with Mazda Mundi and a half HP Carnosaur, that's more than enough to pull out the rest of the victory here. Really, our opponent needs archers to be able to win this fight against all the single entities, and the archers are basically all dead at this point. The bolt thrower is alive though, and we will need to try and figure out a way of shutting it down. I'll be splitting up my forces to try and do that. A little bit risky with Dragon Princes running around, But the only mobile one is getting chased down by a Carnosaur right now, so I think it's safe enough to get my Kroxigor split up. We also have a net of Ammontok that we can throw down right now, actually, and that should be able to finish off the rest of the Dragon Princes. A very important move, since these guys are a win condition for the High Elves, and it'll be a very painful loss actually losing them. We also have a unit of Chameleon Skinks that I completely forgot about. Not extremely important here, but they'll still be a very annoying unit to actually deal with here. Of course, at this point, there's no more High Elf cavalry. We'll just finish chasing them off. Our Kroxigors will likely be dying here, but a worthy sacrifice. Maybe a little bit of an inefficient one. In the future, I probably won't sacrifice them. That did seem a little bit unnecessary, but nevertheless, we still have enough of a lead here. Our opponent throwing out the GG. Our single entities essentially unkillable at this point. There is a unit of Silver in guard. We are out of AoEs, but cycle charging will be more than enough to deal with them. But still, the game goes on, and we'll have to be a little bit careful. Alariel on a horse stands essentially no chance against a Carnosaur. And we're actually a little bit low on Saurus. Our Chameleon Skinks are a little bit low on ammunition. But Terror Rout should be kicking in just a second. Alariel running away from Mazdamundi, doing her best. We can throw down a Shield of the Old Ones. The Kroxigor is even coming back to rout off the archers, and it should be game. Now, there is a chance that Alariel has extremely lucky RNG, and that she'll never get hit by Mazdamundi for the rest of the game. Same with the Carnosaur, and she may carry out the game that way. But the probabilities are definitely quite low. She doesn't have a lot of AP. Actually going up to 100 AP, and that's it. So she's gonna have to hit Mazdamundi about 30 times before he dies. And with a big hit from the Carnosaur, that looks like that's gonna be it for Alariel. And a victory to start off this best of 3. Working out quite well. It is a pretty rough matchup for the High Elves here. The Dragon Princes are an important key to victory, but their cycle charging gets really shut down by nets from Mazdamundi. We saw it happen in that game, and because of that, all of our monsters were just brutal and very effective there. Of course, the classic major misplay coming in from me. My cavalry, I essentially sent them in to die at the beginning of the game. That blob fight, we didn't need the cavalry there. It would have been better just to leave the red-crested skinks. Something to focus on in the future. But for now, this build is good enough. So here we go. It's the Skaven against the Tomb Kings. We bought ourselves a mass gun build. We've shown that it is effective against medium amounts of cavalry. So we're going to be trying to use that as effectively as we can. Many anti-infantry options, as is the usual with these types of builds. Globadiers, Warpfire, and Jezzails, and Rattling Guns. Many different ways of doing a ton of damage here. We are doing the favorite strategy of Falcon, defending guns with guns, which is pretty gross if you can actually pull it off. There are Ushopti that will be able to pressure my weapon teams, and you can see their initial volleys actually do get a lot of damage in. So it's important that we dodge with the weapon teams as best as we can to try and avoid that. Meanwhile, we'll be stealthing our heroes, getting our Jezzails in range, firing with them, and continuing to advance with our army to shut down the Ushopti. Our dogs will be stopping any skirmishers from coming in through the side, and our Jezzails should be able to perform quite well. Some skeleton horsemen coming in to try and dive in onto my troops are going to be meeting a terrible fate, getting essentially just gunned down on sight. And there we go. They should be down, but we've lost a good amount of our anti-infantry options. Snicketch will be able to move up though. There are, however, some sepulchral stalkers that we'll have to worry about, but our Jezzails should be able to carry there. Our rattling guns in the back can do quite well too. And our single entity heroes, well, they're going to be the hope for us today. Rattling guns doing really well against the stalkers. And our goal is to continue advancing as quickly as we can, really allowing our Jezzails to continue getting their damage off. Shut down one unit of Ushabti, but the artillery of my opponent is still proving quite troublesome. Some Nehekar horsemen have dived in onto my weapon teams, but you can see their armor is actually so high that a big cavalry charge doesn't actually rout them off. A big benefit of having weapon teams is that they do indeed have very high armor, and it is going to pay off here as we do actually kill off those horsemen without too much of an issue. Now the Ushabti are still in range of our weapon teams, so we're going to be focused firing them down, targeting one down first before the other. We do that because the Ushabti, they actually take quite a while to crumble away, so we want to actually finish them off first. So now that these guys are basically dead, we'll focus on the second Ushabti unit, and that will make sure that our Jezzails manage to stay safe. We'll also get a Clan Rat summon going down. Our Wolf Rats are going to be staying away from these Nehekar horse archers. Actually, they'll be diving in now, and they should be able to do decently there. We'll have to see. Meanwhile, for the frontline fight, it's the fight between two armies that basically don't have a front line, running into each other, but with my Skaven slaves actually getting routed off rather quickly. And I'm a little bit worried about our left flank. Problem is that our warp fire throwers have actually died off there. And that will allow the horsemen to jump onto my, my Jezzails. That's definitely not great. Who's this? It's Arkin the Black. He's going to be a bit of a problem too. But with a little bit of repositioning from our weapon teams, we should be able to secure our flank. These skeleton warriors will be getting killed by this thankfully one surviving unit of poison wind mortars. And then that should work out. Our dogs have actually done a really good job shutting down the horse archers. And our weapon teams are just going to be running away from the Ushabti summon. That seems to be probably the best idea there. For Jezzails, should be relatively safe. And for the Plague Priest, he is getting hit by Arkin the Black, but a single summon should be able to shut him down. So that's going pretty good. We've chased off all the horsemen. There's barely any infantry left for our opponent. I would say we are in quite a demanding, we're in quite a commanding position here. Arkin the Black, he can't even get debuffed by our assassin at long range. And what that does is it adds a little bit more damage onto him. We could save that debuff for later, but I don't think it's really necessary. It works just fine to throw down the debuff while he's surrounded by infantry. See, it does get a few hundred points of damage on top of him, which is nice. And as for all the monstrous units of my opponent, they're going to be getting they're going to be in a pretty rough time, just because of Snicketch and the assassin. The Tomb Kings will actually have a pretty hard time killing them off, because these guys are really good in melee. And yeah, basically essentially that. They're really good in melee. They can do well against monstrous troops, and they're generally quite tanky. Not to mention, we also have many of our guns rallying. One of the main problems, after you kill off all of their mobility, what generally happens really is the Tomb Kings, or any undead faction, they will dive in onto your guns to try and shut them down. But in the end, they run out of mobility and all of your guns just rally in the late game to cause a ton of problems. And without any horsemen left, there's not really much that they can do. The Jezzails are still functioning at half capacity, even despite having all of the Ushabti dive in on top of them. And from there, they'll be able to take out Arkin the Black rather quickly. We'll just turn all of our guns to fire. Our Jezzails are firing in too. And there we go. A brutal fate for Arkan the Black, getting gunned down by a unit of rattling guns. We even have more summons to throw down if we want to. We might as well, since it will even push our opponent closer to army losses, which should be able to secure our game. Arkan the Black, he can't really dodge just because of the rattling guns, and it will indeed be army losses. So there we go. GG. Well played to our opponent. You did well. But the Ushabti getting caught out by Giselles was pretty rough. Take a look at some damage values here. Not great. The Stalkers too did okay, but also not great. More expecting Hell Pit Abominations to fire in on. And in this case, it didn't have too many targets. The Horse Archers too really got gunned down, and the Cavalry just not enough against the might of the armored weapon teams coming in from the Skaven. Everything should just about have paid for it themselves. The Warp Fire Throwers doing worse than usual, but that's because they were getting focused down by all of the ranged units of the Tomb Kings. So there we go, GG.